You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. We are officially deep into a Pacific Northwest summer. We've already experienced wildfire smoke, 90-degree temperatures, and for the unlucky amongst us, you might have also seen some small black ants crawling across your kitchen counters and floors. I am talking about odorous house ants, so named because of the smell they emit when they are squished. I won't say by who. These little guys are annoying, and they're everywhere this time of year. I even saw a Reddit post referring to Seattle as being placed on top of a giant ant hill. Now, that's not actually true, but it can certainly feel like it around now. That's because if you live in a city like Seattle, you are actually in an ideal ant environment, one that has led to the insect's proliferation. So before we get mad at odorous house ants, maybe it's best to understand this creature. Maybe instead of a war on ants, we can make peace. Todd Murray is the director of Washington State University's Puyallup Research and Extension Center, where he advises the general public on pests and insects, among many other topics. Todd, thank you very much for being on Soundside. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So give us the background on odorous house ants. What are they?
Odorous house ants are a native species, meaning it existed here long before colonization by humans, and it's unusual to have native species become such pestiferous species. It does happen, but in this case, it is really a kind of a unique situation. Most of our pests come from other countries as hitchhikers or things that come on, with people who are intentionally introduced. But this one was here before Europeans settled here and other humans.
So what makes the smell?
Oh, that's a great question. It's a compound that is used in a number of ways. Ants are chemistry experts. They communicate through smells that, like, you'll see them lay down a chemical trail, and that chemical trail will provide information back to their sisters as they forage around for food. But the odorous smell is often associated with like a defensive posture, but it's probably used in a number of ways.
So I understand that odorous house ants can have multiple queens and they can have really complex colony structures. Can you tell us more about how are they organized?
That is what makes this species really special, especially compared to other ant species. It's the perfect ingredients that they have genetically and in their behavior to take advantage of the environments that we've created for them as we've built cities and so forth throughout the Pacific Northwest and the US. And we're actually worried about spreading this one to other places in the world. But this species is able to be nomadic in nature. It's not creating a stationary nest like a lot of other ant species do. So when they feel like that they need a change of scenery, they just pick up their brood and move along. What's also a key ingredient with them is they can have multiple queens within that nest. And so there's always this ability to bud off and make a new nest that then contributes the nutrition and genetic flow back through the colony.
And most other ants are more centralized, like with a single queen, they can't be as mobile as the odorous house ants.
That is a good generalization of a lot of other native ants in the state. One that comes to mind is like a thatching ant, and those are those cool ants that build those very large thatched mounds out in the forest. What's also really interesting about the odorous house ant is it can live life like that. And before we built up and modernized our infrastructure here, they did live in the forest and in more of those kind of traditional ant nests. But because of its genetic plasticity and some of the adaptations it's evolved over the many, many years that it's been in existence, it's been able to exploit our urban environments like a master. It's amazing how well they've just mastered the ability to live with us.
So because of that success, a lot of people around the Seattle area have odorous house ants in their homes, particularly in the summertime. What do you recommend for somebody who says, okay, that's great, they're native, I'd like to look at them from afar, but maybe don't want them in their kitchen? How would you recommend people address an ant infestation?
Yeah, this might sound kind of out there, but I think it's important to understand what a pest is. And these are species on the planet that are interacting with us in a way that we don't like. And we've decided, well, you're a pest, and now we need to change our relationship. So you essentially have to be more of a pest to them than they are of you, and expect that they're going to come into your house every year and start being a pest to them early in the season.
What do you think is effective and environmentally friendly to address an ant problem? Like, is there a certain kind of repellent or trap that you would say is the right way to address this?
As with all pest management, there's never really one way or one, like we call it, the silver bullet to remedy problems. And so it's a combination of things that you got to do around the house. Being clean and cleaning up food debris is a great way to deter ant problems. But these things are teeny, and you can imagine when you're that small, it doesn't take much food for them to feel like, oh, we've scored and this is a great place to set up shop. And so keeping a completely clean household free of debris is difficult. But one thing that people can pay attention to if you have pets, pay attention to the pet food and how you are cleaning up around the pet food, because that is a great protein source for them to take care of. Also, outside is a great place to put some attention. And we recommend people to create a buffer between the plants that you have located outside along your foundation, and at least have a big enough buffer to make it so you can easily walk behind the plant foliage and keep that foliage away from touching the house.
I mean, that's the defensive measures that get ahead of the ants are really important for people to keep in mind. But what if they're in the thick of it and they've got those trails of ants, walking across their kitchen counter and they're at their wits' end? Todd, what do they do?
That's a great question, and that's often when we interface with people, is when it's too late, and they're already a pest problem, and those measures will be something that they'll consider for the future years. We do recommend a number of insecticides that people can use safely around their home. One in particular that I use, because even though I take those preventative measures, you still get some colonies that come inside. And you can look for those early invaders as early as February in the season. So when you see them, it's good to go out and purchase bait stations that are labeled specifically for use in your home. And one of those insecticides that's labeled for safe use in your home is essentially a boric acid type compound. And boric acid is one, while it's not good for the ants, it's safe to use around your house, safe for, around pets, children, and so forth. But it's good to keep those bait stations hidden and not accessible to easily for children and pets. But it is a relatively safe product to use around the home.
So now I want to turn to a different ant, Todd. And this one is a little bit less friendly, it seems. That is the European fire ant. And from its name, I'm assuming this is an invasive species, not a native one. Why are you interested in these ants?
We are really interested in these ants because we don't quite understand the current distribution in the Pacific Northwest. And we have another species that's showing up that's very difficult to distinguish between the two, but they're both non-native invaders. And the reason why we're worried about these ants is they do sting. If you're allergic, they can cause that severe reaction. And it's where this ant has established, made outdoor living sometimes challenging in our parks and backyards.
So you want people to report these European fire ants. how do they know when they've encountered them? And if they do encounter them, they're bitten by one or something, how should they report it?
That's a great question, and we're still working on good reporting lines. And we have a preliminary survey happening this year where we've recruited pest management professionals to help submit those specimens. But a great way to know that you have one of these is if you've been stung. We do have native ants that can sting, but these two ants are different in the sense that they're more aggressive. And we do know that we have populations around Seattle, but we suspect that we have populations spread out throughout the Puget Sound. This is one of the number one pest species in the Vancouver area in British Columbia. And that population has been there for quite a while and has been a struggle for that city to manage. And so we want to get ahead of the curve on this one and get awareness out and so forth. But if people do feel like that they've been stung by an ant, please feel free to contact me. And you can reach me at the WSU Puyallup Research Station via my email address or my phone number that you can find online.
And we can share that in our show notes too, in the podcast version of this interview. Todd Murray, director of the Washington State University Puyallup Research and Extension Center. We've been talking ants with Todd today. Some native ants, some not native ants, some that you might want to make peace with, others that you might want to flag for Todd, basically. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. And it's great to know more about the little guys who are maybe coexisting with us right now.
Thank you so much for having me. I get excited about the topic.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.